Alright, everyone. For this one, we'll be watching Rage's video, but keep in mind, it's a bit outdated at this point. We'll watch a bit of another video to explain the basic gist, but mostly Rage, since he is still a bit more informative. Katana explained. But, we'll also fill in any gaps or things that have been disproven since the video. Rosara explained. Interesting. Glinda said. As long as we gain adequate knowledge about the creature, I believe we'll be fine. Ironwood said. Fantastic, a human gets an all-powerful dragon that can control all of the elements. Adam grumbled. Come on, Adam. Summer seems like one of the good ones. I'm sure she wouldn't let her monster hurt any faunus that isn't doing anything wrong. Ilya defended the Rose Matriarch. Good to hear you guys speak up. You were pretty quiet during the last viewing. Teko noted. 1. Oh, I can't wait to see your monster, Mom. I know it's gonna be super cool. And it will protect you from anything Salem can throw at you. RWBY said. Hey. Don't be thinking I'm a pushover, young lady. I'm still perfectly capable of handling myself. Summer declared, tickling her daughter. We know, Mom. We just want to make sure whatever monster you get can have your back. Yang told her. Well, she'll never get the monster if we don't quiet down and watch the video. Crow reminded them. Right. Start any time, Katana. RWBY shouted, Katana rolling her eyes with a smile, but starting the video. Black dragons. Mysteries. Legends. Unknown and unclassified creatures. No documents or information regarding Alatreon's abilities, ecology or behavior. It is time to unfold this mystery. What's up, guys? Chris here, and welcome to another very exciting video. Today, we will be talking about Alatreon, one of the strongest monsters known to humanity. Or perhaps unknown, considering what little knowledge there is about it. The new announcer declared as an area completely frozen over with thick mist, mostly hiding a large, quadrupedal creature. Whoa. We only got a glimpse of that thing, and I'm already scared. John said, shaking a bit. Every fiber of my being is telling me we should run away from that thing. Blake said fearfully, holding tightly to Emerald. The other faunus nodded slowly as well, Ilya also holding onto Emerald, Velvet hugging Coco tightly as her leader held and rocked her like a baby, and Adam clung to the couch cushion behind him for dear life. Awesome. Then just imagine how bad that's gonna scare the Grimm. Yang said with a smirk. Still, the chance to see a creature of legends. I believe I would take that chance. Pyrrha stated. The blazing black dragon. These are the words that Alatreon was introduced with in the old world. Since it is a black dragon, it falls under the dangerous, first-class monstrous category. These monsters are known to have an unnatural presence. Their abilities are unexplainable, their strength surpasses human understanding, and nothing is known about their origins or roots. Chris explained as a silhouette of the quadrupedal beast was shown, followed by a monstrous bipedal creature looking as if it was made from a volcano, and finally, a very classic-looking dragon. Everyone was shocked and terrified by the final two dragons. That one looks like a volcano monster. Nora cried out. And from even a still image, something about that final dragon gave me a terrible feeling. Ren said. Yeah. Looks alone already tells you it's not to be messed with, but there's something else that gives in this air of danger. Crow agreed. A lot of people refused to believe that Alatreon was an actual creature. The stories seemed way too unrealistic. Therefore, it was seen as a legend from a fairy tale. People doubted that the documents that told these stories about Alatreon are true, so they burned them. Therefore, there is barely any information from previous sightings. This is one explanation why Alatreon is such a huge mystery to this day. He continued as a council of elite-looking hunters was shown stood around a table, before transitioning with a massive collection of books and documents being read by no less than 3 scholars. A few more sketches of the quadruped was shown, before the fire was shown at the mention of the information being burned. What? They burned the only existing documents. Even if what they said on the creature sounded far-fetched, you should never destroy anything that's supposed to help you learn about any dangerous threat. Ironwood ranted furiously. On that, we can all agree, James. What the hunters of the past did was just idiotic. Ashpen agreed. If Dr. RWBY ever found out, he'd go into a long, but very fast rant about the irresponsibility of burning documents, or any form of historical literature. Glinda said, sighing as she could just imagine the lecture in her head. Alright, now on to Rage's video. Tekko cheered. I'm amazed this one somehow avoided being destroyed, too. Winter stated. Thank your lucky stars, I guess. Katana stated. Alright, I can't wait anymore. Let's see this baby in all its glory. Summer said, getting excited and unable to wait anymore. The fascinating opening to a legend was being told as people were shown manipulating the very elements, each with the head of the quadrupedal dragon superimposed over theirs. Water, earth, fire, air. A young girl narrated as an old man in winter robes moved a mass of water. A younger shirtless man launched a chunk of earth from the ground to his head level, where he sent it flying with a kick. A young girl in noble-looking garments performed a fiery punch and flip kick to the ground, and a young boy in light clothing launched a burst of air at the screen. Those people were manipulating the elements. But I did not see a single trace of dust. Penny said in amazement. Yes. Those are benders. They can manipulate specific elements based on their lineage. Waterbenders can control water, ice and snow. Earthbenders can manipulate the ground, rocks, lava and metal. Firebenders are basically cinder and can manipulate fire and lightning and, with enough training, can even create explosions with their minds. Lastly, airbenders can manipulate the air and the winds. As far as I know, they can't extend it to any other kind of element, but that doesn't really matter when they can pull the air out of your lungs and spiral it around your head so you can't breathe. Katana explained, leaving everyone both amazed and horrified. Maybe I should work more on unlocking my semblance. It could be one of those bending thingies. Roman declared excitedly. So, they put Alatreon's head over all of those benders. Does that mean Alatreon is capable of manipulating them? Winter asked, shocked that one creature could command such mighty elements. That's what RWBY asked for. But, you'll get a better description in a minute. Razara said. Long ago, the 4 nations lived together in harmony. Then, everything changed when the girl continued to narrate as a map was shown, before the view dropped down onto a now topographical map, moving through a foggy mountain, into a volcano where the dragon of the video could finally be seen in all its glory stepping up to a ridge. Fuck off, Black Avatar Dragon attacked and killed everyone. Rage suddenly interrupted as the dragon apparently became furious at something, rearing onto its hind legs and roaring, dropping to all 4s and running in a circle and took to the air, the screen zooming in on its face and turning black as a thunder strike was heard, accompanied by Rage's slow, fearful breathing. They kill a lot of people? Velvet asked worriedly. They certainly can, but there aren't any big legends of them ever killing countless numbers of people. Tekko said, relieving everyone. Still, even Rage seems really scared of this one. Weiss said in concern. Easy, guys. Why don't we actually hear things about the monster before we jump to conclusions? Coco said, trying to calm everyone down as one of the upperclassmen. Sound good, Bun Bun? She asked, tickling Velvet a little, getting her to giggle, before nodding and looking back to the screen. Blazing black dragons. so named for resembling both lightning and darkness. They mercilessly tear apart whoever touches their sharp scales. Elementally unstable, their actions can affect the very weather. Living natural disasters. Rage spoke ominously in an echoing voice as the creature's volcanic cone was shown, before the dragon appeared and had its tantrum once again, flying down to an arena where it would do battle with a hunter, giving excellent shots of its fearsome horns, before it roared and caused eruptions all around. Everyone was shocked and unnerved at this knowledge. Unbelievable. Once upon a time, that's the kind of power I craved. Now, hearing anything having that kind of power, let alone a giant dragon. It's terrifying to think about. Cinder stated. Just the scales can tear someone apart? This thing's already sounding unbeatable. Crow stated. Elementally unstable. So it can't control what it does with the elements? Just attack with them? That might be even worse. Ilya said worriedly. Hello, my fellow hunters. First came Fatales and then Alatreon. The next of the first-class dangerous dragons, a black dragon second only to Fatales across the world. Nigh unmatched in elemental fury, the blazing black dragon decimates by simply existing, causing virulent storms of frantic weather, from hail the size of boulders to lightning storms racking the sky in thunderous cry, infernos billowing across the land, leaving ashes in wake and the very ground itself cracking and quaking as it crumbles beneath this titanic might. Alatreon is bad news. Rage declared as Alia faced off against the beast, trying her absolute best to dodge its furious assaults, mostly coming from the dragon element surrounding its horns and claws, before it spat out a huge fireball that created a massive pillar of fire roughly 10 feet in front of itself, accompanied by heart-racing music. So it's the second strongest monster ever? Awesome. Yang said. Yeah, just too bad, it sounds like you can't get within a mile of it, without being in the apocalypse. Blake countered. Maybe he's just overhyping it? Ruby asked hopefully. They then saw the fireball attack. I don't think he's hyped it up enough. Adam said. A living natural disaster, no exaggeration. He really does warp the very atmosphere where he treads, destroying whole settlements by simply being nearby, the residents crying out for salvation, before going silent forever in the face of this apocalyptic weather. Alatreon has no control over this power, for he is a jolly good fellow. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist, Rage explained, before singing the last bit, laughing at the end of it. He is elementally unstable, but we'll get to the core of what that means soon. Firstly, know that Alatreon is said to be a combination, a melding pot, he began, before a very short woman was shown standing on a board, mixing a giant pot with strange music playing, of all the strength and abilities of the true elder dragons, the triumvirate of Kushala Daora, Chameleos and Teostra. For when there is one, the other two are not far away. He finished as the three aforementioned elder dragons were shown. From the sound of things, it sounds more like a mixture of Teostra, Kirin and Velkhana. Pyrrha stated. Maybe, but those three are just a famous trio, the true elder dragons, like Rage said. And at that time, Velkhana hadn't been discovered. Katana explained, petting Glacy's snout. Still, the power of 3 elder dragons in one? It seems impossible. Like it should be too much for a living body to contain. Glinda said in shock. I mean, that is one heck of a body. Those horns alone look like they could contain the power this guy's going on about. Roman said reasonably. Alatreon, then, a fusion of these already potent beasts, and as such, is filled to the brim with unnatural energy. Energy that is produced by his very scales, each one, a tiny organ in of itself, pumping out copious amounts of element. And not all the same element, either. He can summon dragon, ice, thunder and fire. Fuck water, though. Rage declared as a grey view of the ocean was shown with sad music playing. And indeed, he isn't the biggest fan of water itself, living in the heart of volcano in an area known as the Sacred Land, he rules absolute. Fortunately for all, a seclusive and seldom seen creature, happy to live out its days alone. And he really is. He went on his Alia, moved around in a few safe areas around the creature, landing hits with her sword, before disengaging as it thrashed about furiously. A mostly white screen was shown, save for a strange blue creature with Alatreon's head superimposed over the creature's own, as it laid on its back, relaxing. Alone. The creature declared blissfully as the word came out in a comical yellow voice bubble, the word written in light blue. From the smallest insect to the mighty Acantor, Rage explained, a transparent clip of a massive dark, spiky creature shone roaring as he explained it, all flee his presence. For miles around, his kingdom is supremely still. Rage explained as the fight continued as Alatreon took to the sky, sparking with electricity. Ah, poor water. Nora said. How ridiculous. There's so much it could do if it had access to water. How foolish. Winter snapped. Be thankful it doesn't have that access, then. Ironwood told his subordinate. It is fortunate it chooses to live in seclusion, then. So it doesn't hurt anyone. Penny said in relief. Still, I know there are more solitary animals, but to have no other creatures around for miles, that's not like any other animal I've ever heard of. Emerald said, shocked. They were shocked that even the terrifying-looking Acantor would flee from Alatreon. No way. That thing looks big enough to eat Alatreon for a snack, but he's running from it? Summer asked in disbelief, before grinning. Amazing. It's going to be incredible having my own Alatreon. No Grimm would ever challenge me again. Summer cheered. And the weather, practically destroying everything around it? Crow asked. Summer thought for a minute, before looking to Neo. Neo dear? I'll have to borrow that umbrella, she said as Neo hugged her weapon closely. The scales then, consistently generating this concoction of power, do so of their own accord. Alatreon cannot will it, Alatreon cannot control it, he must simply channel it. And to do so, he has two distinct modes. While bound groundward, he can use fire and dragon, able to fire a small ball of flame that upon impact with the ground, ignites into a veritable pyroclasm geyser, melting those within to a mere puddle. The dragon then, not used as you might expect. It acts much more akin to a steroid, coating his body in crackling red as he charges at you, turning his already indomitable physical might up to beyond what should be possible for mere flesh to contain, barreling through even the toughest opponents like they were not but wind. Essentially, for an Alatreon, dragon element is. Rage began as the Alatreon fought in the air, trying to slam down on Alia with electrified forelegs or calling down lightning bolts. Suddenly, a clip showed a green-haired boy with lines of power coursing through his body, greatly amplifying his strength. In my whole body, continuously. To the upper limit my body will allow 5%. The boy declared. That has to be tricky, not being able to control which element you're controlling at the moment. John said. Surely, they've found a way to compensate for that, Mr. Ark. Clearly, the Alatreon can make it work for themselves. Ashton said, gesturing to the screen. Using dragon as a steroid is nothing new, but it definitely seems to use it to a higher degree than Deviljo or Ebony Odogaron. But I think this is the first one we've seen use dragon in physical attacks, like horns, claw and tail swipes. Neo said. Boo, but who's that kid powering up like that? That looks awesome. I want to try that. Nora said. No. Rizara, Teko and Katana all cried out in a panic. He almost looks like you when you charge Moonslice, Adam. Blake said, a bit awkwardly, talking to her former boyfriend who she just ditched and, according to Katana, later murdered. A bit. Adam admitted. But to Alatreon, then. He is really quite competent when it comes to a fight. As a black dragon, he is devilishly clever, on par with man at a minimum. He knows what he needs to do to dismantle any given opposition, using brutal swipes enhanced with dragon, throwing his weight around and generally causing a ruckus. You do not want to go mano-a-mano with this Drago, you know. Rage declared, a long pause following this line, accompanied by the sound of crickets. It sounded better in my head, if I'm completely honest. Rage said awkwardly as Alatreon fired massive spikes of ice from its mouth at Alia, who narrowly avoided them. Actually, I thought it was kind of funny. Nora admitted. Yeah, I liked it too. Ruby agreed. Don't. The last thing he needs is encouragement. Weiss chastised them. Geez, Ice Queen, get a sense of humor. The guy's pouring his heart out here, trying to inform and entertain. That's quality service you don't get nowadays. Except from that shopkeep who works, like, everywhere. I almost feel bad about constantly robbing him. Torchwick said. But as I said, Alatreon cannot really control this, only channel it. So all the scales are constantly bubbling, and when they reach boil, Alatreon has to essentially go. Rage began, before a ding noise was heard. Dragon's ready. Then the shroud of power erupts, and he kills you so hard, your entire family line feels it. Rage declared as Alatreon chased after Alia while in the air, breathing a stream of freezing cold air at her, which she managed to stay ahead of, before the creature flashed with the black and red of dragon energy and returned to the ground and knocked an attacking Alia away with a dragon-fueled claw slash. Crow got a sudden chill at that comment. Whoa. Just felt dizzy for a second. But I haven't drank in days. Weird. He said. Yeah, I got a bit of a dizzy spell, too. Young agreed. Teko and Rosario looked to their mother. You dropped an Alatreon in her camp, didn't you? They asked. She lived. She'll probably just be terrified and paranoid of ever seeing another. Katana defended. So that is dragon and fire. When he then goes airborne, he switches to thunder and ice. This mode switch again not something he can entirely control, it's simply a case of oh. I guess we're full of lighting now. I'm gonna go into the air. And while there, he puts on a show that almost makes a Kirin jealous, striking the area around him with bolts of death. They cause havoc. Rage declared. Blasphemy. No dragon can come close to my thunder pony. Nora declared, jumping on her Sigrin's back and wrapping her arms around her neck. Thankfully, the Kirin was full-sized at this point, so even Nora squeezing the unicorn did little to her. The unicorn turned its head around and got a mouthful of Nora's skirt, before pulling her off her back and dropping her back down the side run. Sadly, it is true, little Valkyrie. Powerful as my lightning may be, Alatreon's power makes mine seem like a thunderbug in comparison. Sigrun admitted. And that's straight from the horse's mouth. It has to be true. Then this creature's command of lightning is nightmarish. Rin said in horror. Huh. Horse's mouth. Good one, Ren. John said, trying to relieve some of the tension in the room. And beyond that, akin to dragon. Well, he wraps himself all snug and warm in a blanket of blue and comes flying, propelled with thunderous force to tear you apart. His wings, then, muscled and powerful, beating with such force that on the way past, lesser creatures can be slain by the mere air pressure alone. Then we have the ice, and ice is Alatreon's final gambit. Initially, able to fire it out of his maw, and seriously, an Alatreon maw. I mean, just take a good look at this guy's gob. Rage declared as the camera got a close-up on Alatreon's mouth as the beast roared, but instead of its roar, a comical scream came out. Imagine shoving your arm in there. It'd actually probably be quite comfy. I mean, because he's boiling inside because of all the swirling energy, and it's probably quite soft as well, because it's the interior of a living thing. Is that just me? Rage tried to get his point across as romantic music played. Everyone, even Ruby and Penny, were thinking the same thing. What the fuck is wrong with him? Adam questioned aloud what was on all their minds. If you stick your arm in its mouth, you're losing that arm. Either from the heat of it boiling on the inside or, far more likely, he'll bite it off. Coco said. I wish I could defend him, but I really can't in this situation. Velvet said. The ice can also come in a form then, of a frigid beam, a swirl of cold, freezing those it passes over, stopping them quite literally dead in their tracks. A hunter hit is not left in the greatest of situations. Rage explained the dangers of the beast's ice attack as Alia was shown trapped in a large ball of snow and ice, running as much as she could in this sluggish new state as Winter Wonderland music began to play. But by far, the greatest power of the ice and, like I said, Alatreon's final gambit, is to head skyward, high above the battlefield and summon an apocalyptic hailstorm, dropping ice crystals the size of Bullfango and every bit as annoying in mass, hurtling towards the hunters below as they play the most dangerous game of dodge. Rage declared as Alatreon indeed flew high above the battlefield, breathing a chilling mist into the air above it while swaying its head back and forth, creating a number of ice crystals that rained down towards Alia as she desperately tried to stay ahead of and otherwise evade them. That's something I'd expect from one of you schnees. Neo stated. It is quite impressive. It would even be beautiful if it wasn't so deadly. Weiss agreed. I'd be more concerned with being trapped in the giant snowball. At least it looks like you can dodge the hail if you keep moving. Emerald criticized. If you're wondering how his scales actually do work like this, well, it's simply because each of them has a tiny speaker inside, playing this on loop. Rage explained, zooming in on Alatreon's scales as an epic metal song about the elements began to play. Look, I'm gonna take any opportunity to sneak that song into anything, thank you. In reality, it is an utter bloody mystery. I mean, he has a question mark as a monster picture for a reason. The guild just kind of looked at him and went, I don't fucking know. What do you want from me? Look at that. What? I mean, all the black dragons do share this question mark and, well, rightly so. They are just enigmas. Rage said as the battle between Alia and Alatreon continued. So, their category is as much of a mystery as Gormagalis? Ilia asked. It would seem so. Little, if anything, is known about either of them, so putting them in a mystery category only makes sense. Winter stated. But it is still categorized by an elder dragon, they simply do not have a picture for it. Likely, because so few returned from fighting it. Penny offered, making sense to the two of them. This then, is the Alatreon. A lesser monster would get ripped apart by the power his scales are churning out and swirling around his body. But fortunately, his scales, his hide is as iron, akin to his very will, and he is able to harness this trait. One of the most combat-able, physically powerful monsters, backed up by a chaotic concoction of concentrated elements, all peaked in their strength. Alatreon then, simply is supreme. Rage declared as Alia swung her sword while Alatreon charged at her, hitting the beast and knocking it to the ground, but the electricity also flowing through her and launching her back. I believe it. After seeing all that, it's hard to argue against it. Crow said. Indeed. Salem may not even stand a chance against it. Ashpen agreed. Which is a good thing. Then Summer won't have to worry about that awful witch again. Glinda said, smiling at her old friend. Any of these killed make a hunter legendary. They are so seldom brought to bear. And on top of all of this, really, his scales producing his element are also one of the sharpest and deadliest scales to simply touch out of them all. Bringing weakly crafted weapons to him. Well, you're asking for this to happen. Rage warned as a clip was shown of a woman with an Alatreon's head superimposed over her own stood before a man in a suit with a katana, the image of a long sword over his head as the woman sliced at his katana with her own, breaking several inches clean off of it. And even a hunter just stumbling and falling against his hide. Well, they're going to be reduced to bloody ribbons. Rage said, unnerved. RWBY and Summer were in awe of the idea of such powerful scales. That would be so awesome. Imagine the weapons we could make. RWBY said excitedly. I know, sweetie. They would be amazing. Summer said, before looking a bit upset. But if they tear people to ribbons, how can I possibly pet it? She said sadly. Blake rolled her eyes, but smiled. Like mother, like daughter. She said, remembering RWBY wondering how to pet Ceregios. I've sliced someone's weapon like that once or twice. I have to admit, I loved the horrified faces they made. Adam said with a smirk. Yeah, pretty hard to look tough when your only means of defending yourself gets shorter and shorter. Roman agreed. But that actually is about it. A fantastically fun fight that tests you as a hunter and your skill to the max against a monster that is truly in a league of its own, even if his horns are a bit silly. Rage finished as Alia and a few other hunters were attacking a flying Alatreon again and managed to drop it out of the air. I actually like Alatreon's horns. They're quite unique and they give off the appearance of an emperor. Cinder said in admiration. Yeah. They look like that's where all the power is. Emerald agreed. Not to mention, they look more than capable of going straight through. I certainly wouldn't be caught making fun of them. Pyrrha added. So, what are your thoughts? Katana asked. It's incredible, but with its power so unstable, it would likely doom Remnant if even one was put upon it. Ashbin said in concern. Well, remember, a lot of that was outdated knowledge. Which we will be correcting now. First off, the horns actually control the elements, not the scales. The scales do glow with and charge up elemental power, but the horns dictate exactly what gets charged. And Alatreon's simple existence does not create nightmarish storms, rain, earthquakes, etc. It has to actively want to destroy a place to bring all that down. It can change the weather at a moment's notice, but again, has to try to do that. Razara said. Thank goodness. Glinda said in relief. Yeah, I kind of like Patch. I'd prefer if it didn't get wiped off the map. Young agreed. So, does it still have different modes, like in the air and on the ground? RWBY asked. Yes and no. It can do basically all the same stuff in the air as it can on the ground, but it does have 3 specific modes. Fire active mode, where it mostly relies on fire attacks. And ice active mode, where it mostly relies on ice attacks. They can still use all the other elements while in these forms, though. And lastly, dragon active mode, where it relies a lot more on dragon attacks, way more than its elemental ones, flying forward like a jet surrounded by dragon element, or even making huge dragon explosions. You can tell which is which based on the color their horns, wings and scales are glowing. Orange means fire, blue means ice and purple means dragon. Plus, they can use water, but it's more like an oil, because it's super flammable. Teko added. So it truly does have all 5 elements. How can anyone stand up against that? Ironwood asked. Surely, it would take an army. Winter said. Nope. Just good coordination and the right weapons. It's weak to ice in fire active mode, fire and ice active mode and dragon in dragon active mode. If you hit it enough with the element it's weakest to, or even ones it's just vulnerable to, you can counter and overload the element in its scales and weaken its power. And, when in dragon active mode, you can break its horns, temporarily preventing it from changing into whichever mode it was going to shift to, like from fire to ice or vice versa. Katana added. Well, that sounds a lot more manageable. Now I'm confident anyone here could take an Alatreon. Weiss said proudly. The demonic family burst out laughing at this. That's adorable. Teko laughed. It can also combine certain attacks, such as lighting its water patches on fire, or striking its ice structures on the field with lightning, causing them to explode with dragon energy. And then, there is its ultimate attack, the Eschaton Judgment, where it will unleash all of the elemental energy it's been building up all at once, and, unless you've previously weakened its power, it's impossible for a human to survive. Even we can barely handle it. Everything in roughly half a mile will be vaporized. So, you'd all need to be as fast as RWBY to escape. Katana explained. She then showed a clip of the attack, and a group of 4 hunters collapsed in what seemed like half a second. They were all shocked at this. Unreal. Cinder said in awe. I estimate that attack has at minimum 5 megatons of force. Penny said. 2. But, the main thing is, an Alatreon won't devastate everything around it unless it wants to? Summer asked. That's basically it, yes. And as for its wanting to be a lone thing, I can just tweak its personality a bit. Katana said. Awesome. Mother and daughters said together. So, not that this isn't fun, but it would be way more fun if we got our monsters now. Roman declared. For once, I agree. Adam said. Very well, prepare yourselves and behold your brand new monster partners. Katana announced, before a blinding flash of light enveloped the room.